This week, North Dakota wants to ruin the iPhone, Maryland is taxing advertisements, and Australia still wants a piece of Google. It's Sunday, February 14th, 2021, and this is episode 587 of F5 Live Refreshing Technology. Wherever you are and however you're accessing our show, whether it be on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Snapchat, through a podcatcher like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, TuneIn, or a myriad of other options, through our live stream platforms, livestream.com, Twitch, Periscope, YouTube, or Facebook, or on our website, PLUGHITZlive.com. Thank you for making us a part of your day. There are two ways that you can do that. The first is you can join us live Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern by going to f5live.tv/join us. There you can chat with us in the studio, give us your feedback on the topics as we talk about them. We always love to hear what you have to say. If you're not able to join us live, that's okay. You can always go to plughitslive.com/subscribe. And there you'll see all of our shows, including F5 Live, The Piltch Point, PLUGHITZ Live Presents, and a whole lot more. And of course, you can find all the ways to watch, listen, and follow along. Hello, Avram.
Hey.
We were off last week because I was sick. But so it's been 2 weeks since we've talked. How have you been?
Oh, not bad, not bad. It's just spending a lot of time doing things with my son, getting together, working on new projects, new Raspberry Pi projects, Raspberry Pi Pico projects. As always, my desk is a complete mess of wires and jumper cables and all kinds of this giant mess. The latest thing we're working on, we want to try to figure out how to be able, who I think will be the first to do it. So we're trying to figure out, it's easy enough using the Pico to create a controller.
Okay.
You could totally plug this into a PC and make it a controller, but getting a Nintendo Switch to recognize it is another level of frustration because the Switch, I guess, is really picky and you can't just plug any USB controller into it. Right. It's expecting something very specific. So I've been trying for a while to figure out how to get it to work so that we can actually make our own Switch controller. Speaking of, I should mention one thing that we did get working, which is pretty cool and is available to everybody, is my friends at surrogate.tv, they have a really neat thing going where you can, if you have a Raspberry Pi and you get a little board called an Adafruit Trinket M0, you can connect that to your Switch, use software, which they have instructions on their site how to use, and then your Switch can be controlled over the internet. And you can, you also have to have a capture card. But you can make your Switch. Now, I don't know I have to be real honest, I don't know if Nintendo would look kindly upon this.
Right.
So I just, try it for myself. But they have a setup where it's not just for Nintendo. Their platform also works for you can set up a robot and have people drive it around.
Okay.
But one thing that you can do is you can literally set up a Nintendo Switch, and they have done it so that you can have a game going and people can come and each person can play for 1 minute or something like that.
Okay.
And control it using over the internet.
Okay. When that Twitch plays Pokemon thing came about, Nintendo didn't try and put a stop to that, and that was controlling a Nintendo console over the internet. So I don't know that they'd necessarily be too worried about it, but yeah, I can understand why there'd be some concerns over Nintendo's response. They've been unpredictable as of late.
Yes, but what's neat is from a technological point of view, which is what interested me, is you were able to emulate a controller, over the internet. You're able to completely remote control the switch. So what I'm trying to do is figure out how to do that locally,
Right.
and do it with a Raspberry Pi Pico.
And see what, yeah. So, and essentially try and figure out what is reported to the switch under a normal circumstance to determine what a valid controller looks like.
Yeah,
Makes
yeah,
sense.
it's complicated. There's like, I'm learning all about USB HID descriptions. So we'll figure.
Yeah, that is a that is a whole special beast you're getting yourself into. Um, so we're gonna try something new tonight here at the top of the show. We're going to reply to some of the comments from a previous show because you guys have some questions about the last episode of the Piltch Point, and I thought that our viewers on both shows might be interested in hearing what's going on here. The most common question, Avram, is around your commentary on the CPU. Several people have heard you say that it's the fastest mobile CPU. Now, before the show, you and I talked about what that may or may not mean, or what you may or may not have actually said. We think we know, but can you? There's like 4 or 5 people who have all made comments on this. Do you remember exactly what we were talking about?
Yeah, so the Alienware M17R.
Good. I was going to say, we didn't mention what the last episode was, so I'm glad you did.
Yeah, so we were talking about the Alienware M17R4 gaming laptop that I have reviewed, and said that this is the fastest gaming laptop that we have tested, and probably the fastest on the market right now, especially in the configuration that we tested it. And the CPU, probably, depending on what your standard is probably the current generation fastest. It is the Core i9-10980HK. So that is the latest Intel 10th gen. I mean, 11th gen, I think, we're on the cusp of, but we don't have 11th gen 45 watt processors right now.
Right.
So there is a Ryzen 9, I think, coming out. So there's a 45 watt that we haven't tested. So one could argue about which is faster. We haven't done a comparative test for that. There's no question that the GPU in it is the fastest, because there is no faster mobile GPU right now than the RTX 3080. Now, I'm talking about consumer and gaming, not about mobile workstation, which would be a different standard. Xeon processor, mobile Xeon processors, and mobile professional grade graphics cards, which are not made for gaming. But there's no question that the 3080 is the current fastest mobile GPU. I mean, and combine that with a Core i9-10980HK, and let's take this to another step. Not all, I think I said this on the show, not all 3080s are created equal. NVIDIA sells them with a bunch of different SKUs. I mean, I'm talking about for laptops,
okay,
with different TGPs, which is total graphics power. That's how much wattage it requires and can use up to. And the more watts that it uses, the faster it is. That's just
sure
the physics of GPUs. If you're using more, particularly on the same processor, you're getting more performance. So it has a 165 watt TGP, which, according to my sources, is the fastest. NVIDIA has actually only set up to, I think, 150 or 150 and above. So this is the fastest. This is the fastest. This is the fast, and we saw, compared to other competitors that we compared it to, who were also using RTX 3080 mobile cards, this was sometimes as much as 20% higher frame rates.
Oh.
So with another laptop with the same GPU, possibly with a Core i7 instead of a Core i9, so not 100% apples to apples, although most of that frame rate is almost always due to the GPU, not the CPU. So in short, it is definitely the fastest mobile processor around, and very likely the fastest mobile CPU, definitely the fastest mobile GPU around. We have not compared it to the latest mobile Ryzen 9, which I don't think there's many systems that have, or that have also with a 3080 in them.
And so. I was going to say, and it's that pairing of the CPU, which we can easily say is in the top couple, and the GPU together makes it a blazing system.
Yeah,
an overall system.
It's probably. I mean, it probably cannot. You probably will not, with the current generation of parts, see a faster gaming laptop than this, unless somebody uses desktop parts.
Right.
And that does happen from time to time. I'm not aware of anybody doing it right now. In past, we have seen once in a while someone will come out with just a giant laptop that uses a CPU that is a desktop CPU instead of a mobile one, or uses a desktop graphics card instead of a mobile one, which means that they're using hundreds of watts more than this, and they just don't care in the least about size or battery life. And maybe you shouldn't when you're spending this kind of money and you're getting something kind of heavy. But generally speaking, not many companies come out with those. So as far as a pure laptop, I don't think it's going to be any faster than this, particularly because Alienware chose to go with the fastest version of the RTX 3080. And since our show, I had been emailing back and forth a bit with Alienware, and one thing that they told me is that the 15-inch version of this laptop, which I tested but not with the 3080 in it, does not use the highest end 3080.
Okay.
They can't, because it's in that size, in the 15-inch size, it couldn't accommodate the heat. Like that's a factor, right? If you want the fastest, you want the highest watts, you got to deal with the heat. And dealing with the heat means you need larger space, better cooling, care less about battery life. So the Alienware M17R4, it takes the position that performance is the most important thing, and it delivers accordingly.
Gotcha. And just because I feel like I may have missed the numbers, you were talking about the wattage on the GPU. This one is
165 watts.
Gotcha.
Of total graphics power. A lot of the others are significantly less than that.
Got it. The reason I ask is somebody in the comments, which is obviously what we're doing, mentioned at 150 watts, which I thought you had said that this was higher than the 150.
This is higher than 150.
Okay.
So NVIDIA, I think, has only disclosed and said, I think NVIDIA has disclosed. I'm not even really. I'm sorry if I'm not 100% sure about what they have and haven't disclosed, but I think the most that has been documented as like a spec was like 150, but this is 165. I used that is what it displayed for those who are really want to know how I know that. If you have any laptop with an NVIDIA graphics card inside and you use NVIDIA Control Panel, which is NVIDIA software, there's in the lower left corner of the screen, there's something, I think it says All Settings, and you go there and it will actually show you like a little bunch of specs about your graphics card. and there's two things that are really important to know on that list. One is the total graphics power, which in this case it said 165, and the other is whether it has Max-Q technology enabled. Max-Q is the technology that a lot of NVIDIA cards use, a lot of NVIDIA mobile cards use, that turns the performance down in order to have less heat, and therefore max Q, like max quiet, less fan noise.
Got it.
So a lot of laptop vendors make the decision that I'm going with max Q because I want my laptop quieter and cooler and lighter. But Alienware went the other way and said, I want my laptop to be the fastest.
Yeah.
So
make it
when
max
we are
performant.
reviewing, yep, exactly. They used to actually, I believe they used to actually call this Max P, but they don't list that anymore as a spec. And the Max Q, Max P thing is somewhat like NVIDIA, I think, and vendors a lot don't really like to talk about this a lot, because it's, if you look at it, you might see that theirs is slower than somebody else's or whatever. Now I think that there's actually been some movement to list TGP, on spec sheets that there wasn't before, but I don't think everybody's still everyone's doing it. Certainly from now on, when we do a review of a laptop, we at Tom's Hardware, we are going to list the TGP.
Good idea.
So, because that's something you got to keep in mind, because not all, I think the biggest message you can take away from this is, just because it says it has a 3080 inside, or even a 3070 inside, or some other card inside, does not mean that they're all that one laptop and another laptop that have the same card are going to deliver the same exact performance, because you have to know a good clue as to how much wattage what their total graphics power is.
Makes sense. Another question from Stephen K is, how is the battery life when not gaming? Office stuff, YouTube, that type of thing.
That's when we measured the battery life.
That's what I thought. And
that was just over 2 hours. So, battery life when gaming, I mean, would be, we don't list it. We had, I think, a standardized test we ran that's a little over an hour, but you can't really game on battery anyway. So battery life was 2 hours and 5 minutes on our standard test, which is just surfing the web. So in other words, pretty poor battery life. Gaming, forget it. But the other thing to keep in mind is most folks don't even bother gaming on battery because they can't get the full performance.
Right.
Because without the power plugged in, the system, any laptop will kind of go into a lower power state, even if you turn everything up in the battery settings. And so you won't get very good gaming performance, because it literally can't supply from the battery. It can't supply, I think, enough continuous wattage or voltage or whatever.
Makes sense.
Enough continuous power to give you the level that you can from the plug.
Makes sense. There's one comment that is aimed directly at us. They don't like your music. Which is
what?
Right.
What?
One of our favorite parts.
I can't. I'm sorry.
Sorry
you don't like the music.
They must be young.
It's
definitely a pretty.
Next time we'll try to use "Never Gonna Give You Up" as the music. Cool.
Oh, that would be pretty funny. And then we got a comment that says that we are an underrated channel, which I appreciate. Thank you.
Definitely true.
We agree. Anyway, thank you guys for the comments, and keep them coming. If you're watching live, comment. We can see the comments during the show. We can try and address comments during the topic if we can. If not, we will try and get back to you next week if we have topics to get back to. But speaking of topics to get to, we've got a lot of news to cover, so let's get to it. This week's Nifty Gifties and F5 Live is proudly powered by the Microsoft Store. Whether you're looking for a new laptop, a tablet, Xbox games, a whole lot more, you can get it all at the Microsoft Store. And remember that current students, faculty, parents, and active military can save up to 10% on almost everything. To find out what deals are going on and to find out about those discounts, you can go to f5live.tv/Microsoft. So we've talked about privacy on the iPhone a number of times over the last couple of years. Sometimes that it's overhyped, sometimes that they're doing the right thing, and sometimes that they've gone too far. On the last show, at the last show I think it was, we discussed where they had gone right and annoyed Facebook and a number of others with the new "Do you want to be tracked?" dialogue in iOS 14.5. This week, however, we're going to talk about a law that is potentially going to go into effect. It's been a bill has been proposed. It's got some support. We'll see what happens. In North Dakota, that would require digital platforms. That would prevent any digital application distribution platform from locking users into a single exclusive distribution method. Now, if you've used an Apple product, particularly a mobile product, you know that is the business model, whether it be iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, Apple TV. That's the business model. You can only get stuff from the App Store. But they're not the only ones. There are other platforms out there that do the same thing, sometimes for the same reason, sometimes not. Roku is a great example. But this is really focused around Apple. Essentially, what North Dakota wants to do is prevent Apple from preventing you from installing apps, including other app stores. Now, they exist on Android. We've talked about that. Samsung's got the Galaxy Store and Google Play on their devices. There are alternate app stores. There are alternate app stores for iOS too. In fact, we talked about it a couple weeks ago. There was an app store available for the iPhone before the App Store. But obviously, Apple is fighting this because this is where they live, right? Is in the App Store, and in particular that 30% cut of all sales. So they are claiming, and in particular their chief privateness engineer, which isn't a word, Eric, too many letters, said that the bill would, quote, destroy iPhone as you know it. Which is true, and I think what the bill's going for, right, Avram?
Yeah, so here's what I wonder about this. North Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
North Dakota, last I checked, has 760,000 people living in it. So that's one of 50 states. It's one of the least populous states in the United States. It's not the least. I think that's Wyoming, but North Dakota is close. It's less than 1 million people.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's less people in that state than there are in Pinellas County.
Yeah, it's so it's interesting that of all the states that could take up this cause,
yeah,
it's North Dakota. Now, on the other hand, I suppose North Dakota also doesn't have any Apple campuses in it or anything. So I guess they're probably not worried about offending Apple. Maybe there are Apple campuses there. I don't know. But it sounds like maybe not.
There may not even be an Apple store, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. So they don't have anything to lose, I guess, except except here's the thing, and I'm guessing Apple probably doesn't spend a lot of money donating to North Dakota politicians.
True.
But uh, but here's the thing: if I'm Apple and this law passes, could I not just like quit the North Dakotan market? Like, it's probably not worth Apple's while to even that would be extremely bizarre though. Like, I'm sorry, you can't use your iPhone in this state, and I'm not even sure what that means.
Right.
Like, what that would mean. Like, what would that mean? Like, when you cross, would it be geo-tracked, or would it be just we don't sell it to anybody in North Dakota, but if you buy elsewhere and you go into North Dakota, then nobody's the wiser.
Right.
Like, how? Because I'm thinking that from Apple's perspective, they really care about this.
Yes.
And if it were California or something, then they would kind of have to comply.
Right.
But if it's North Dakota, maybe they say, hey, that's fine. We're going to pull out of North Dakota. We're going to tell all of our customers in North Dakota, sorry, complain to your local representative about why you can no longer use your device. Now, I mean, I don't know, like what the penalty is. I mean, is it going to be like they just can't sell any new devices into North Dakota if they don't obey, or they have to geolocate and disable them? What is the? I mean, I can't tell from this article what the kind of penalty would be.
Yeah.
But my guess is, if I'm Apple, I'm probably thinking like, okay, if this happens, I'm just going to pull out of this market, which would be very bizarre, but nevertheless, probably the most viable thing for them to do, because it's probably not even worth their while to create this exception in their software, because once they do it for North Dakota, it'll happen elsewhere, and Apple has the leverage to this is kind of like with cable, where you have your cable company doesn't want to pay, CBS to the carriage fee.
Mm-hmm.
And so CBS is like, fine, I'll just go off the air, and then I'll tell all of your subscribers that you're refusing to give them CBS. And it almost always works out.
For a full 6 weeks before the contract expires, we will run in every bumper, your cable company is the reason why this is happening.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, I feel like the North Dakotan politicians who pass this can't win, because if they pass the law, which, by the way, like, I think is a good idea, because people should have the freedom to load different software onto their devices.
Right.
Apple makes it uniquely difficult. Maybe not unique, pretty unique. I mean, you mentioned Roku.
In mobile, in particular, it's uniquely difficult.
I can't think of. I mean, I don't know of too many things that aren't on Roku that I would want to sideload, and it's I've never thought about that before, to be honest.
Well,
with Apple,
a great conversation there was around HBO Max, and the fact that HBO and Roku were in a battle over royalties to be on the platform, and that's why it took so long for HBO Max to come to Roku, is they were actually battling over royalties, because you can only load things through the Roku store.
So that's a somewhat rare case, because it's not like there are all these other channels that are out there that you can't get that you want.
But
there's lots of people just creating channels.
But it is the exact same argument that Epic makes for iOS.
Yes. So, but what's going on with Apple, we've been talking about this for years, but what's going on with Apple's walled garden is they make it very difficult for people to get into the store. You have to pay them a cut if you're making any money off of your app. And if you think about it, just imagine if that were the case when the PC launched.
Right.
I mean, we're all living in a world where when the PC launched, there was no such concept of an app store. So the original PC and Mac, you could always, even though today there are stores like the Microsoft Store and the Apple Store, you can still download an application from anywhere and install it on your Mac or install it on your PC or install on your Linux computer. What Apple is saying is there to protect consumers is really there to kind of infantilize consumers and give them so Apple can get their money.
Right.
I mean, they all, don't get me wrong. I think Google would love, wouldn't mind to do the same thing. What they've done with the Google Play Store, though, is that they've at least left open the option for people to sideload apps, which, by the way, is great, is also very key if you are a developer or you're just creating an app to give to a handful of people or within your company or things like that, because Apple makes it extremely difficult, as we know, you and I know.
You know, in particular.
We have one of my, for the benefit of our audience who aren't in on this, you and I you have helped us at my company a lot of, not us at Tom's Hardware. We don't really end up testing iOS devices much, but our sister site Tom's Guide, they test iPhones and iPads all the time, and you've developed their tests, the battery tests that they use, and we don't want the battery tests going into the Apple Store for everybody in the world to get, but it's a real pain to distribute that to the handful of phones that we test every year. You need a special account. It's a real pain. Whereas if you have an Android device, you just give someone the APK file, they copy it onto their phone, drag and drop, and they can install it.
Yeah.
So I think, North Dakota's heart is in the right place. I think that they're going to have a hard time actually influencing winning this fight because Apple has all the leverage.
Right. And on this topic in particular can be incredibly petty.
Yes. I can listen, if they were willing to kick Epic out, what strange as it would be to not operate in one of 50 states, I can completely see Apple doing something where they pull out of North Dakota.
Doing a Google News Spain, which ties us into the end of the show, where we will talk about a follow-up on that topic. But it'll all depend, of course, on how the bill is presented, right? If it applies to devices within the state, are they going to kill iPhones as they cross the border? There's a lot of hiccups all of a sudden. It's going to come down to the exact wording on this bill and how creative Apple's lawyers can get when this inevitably goes to court. But
the other thing is, if you are living in North Dakota or passing through there, I wouldn't worry about this for a while, because it's going to be tied up. If it passes, it would be tied up in lawsuits and I wouldn't be surprised if this went all the way to the Supreme Court. Now,
it would. If
North Dakota were to do this in concert with some other states that were larger, more powerful states, then maybe they would be in a better position.
I would bet money that if they contacted Texas would get on board with it. And they've got Apple manufacturing in Texas, so it's definitely interesting. We've got a lot of topics tonight, kind of around this concept of trendsetters or laws that are testing boundaries. This is one of them. We've got some more coming up in a little while, but first, the Piltch Point. This week's Piltch Point with Avram Piltch is Proudly powered by PureVPN. The best way to protect your privacy online is with PureVPN. You can hide your online activities, say goodbye to regional restrictions, and improve your streaming quality. Plus, it's available for almost all of your devices, and you can get a special price right now by going to piltchpoint.live/PureVPN. All right, so what have you got for us tonight, Avram?
So, crypto mining. If you've been trying to buy a graphics card lately, you may have noticed that they're all sold out, unless you go to eBay or someplace like that, or sometimes the low-end cards like the 1650 you'll see selling for something like $400, which is more than 2 times their MSRP. It is a very bad time to buy a graphics card. One of the reasons why it's a very bad time to buy a graphics card is that people are not only snapping them up for gaming, because there's been a huge, there's been a lot of shortages, and everybody wants the new NVIDIA RTX 3000 series and the new AMD Radeon 6000 series, and both of those have been nearly impossible to get. But so have older cards. It's really, really difficult, and a lot of people are using them for crypto mining. They're using, all of a sudden, where mining had kind of fallen out of favor, at least among PC users, because Bitcoin, the most well-known currency, people stop mining with PCs and they mine now with ASICs, systems that are made specifically. They don't use consumer graphics cards that are made specifically to mine, and people buy those, and those work so much better than PCs. Nobody uses PC for it anymore. However, Ethereum, another currency, is still mined with PCs, and Ethereum has been going up. And so people want to mine Ethereum, and there are people who are even buying laptops, setting them up in like laptop farms, taking the casing off so they can cool them better, and running a business that way to try to.
One of my favorite photos that I saw this week online was the little tent city of laptops that had the bodies pulled apart, but they're all like little teepees all around on the ground because they're all doing crypto mining. Pretty funny photo.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's China there. I think, yes, you're looking at. I think that we have an article on Tom's Hardware about this. That they have like basically crypto mining farms in China, and they've just set up a whole bunch of laptops. I think the reason they're using laptops is just that it's hard to get the desktops. It's hard to get the desktop cards. So this is one way of getting their hands on something that can mine, even though laptops are not the best for mining by any stretch. Nevertheless, for those mining, a lot of people are spending a lot of money, and frankly, it's not a good get-rich-quick scheme. If you haven't been mining already, there's a good chance that trying to get into it, you're going to lose money, because even though everything's going up now with Ethereum, it's going to take a long time for you to recoup your investment, because not only do you have to spend a lot of money on the hardware that you need to mine, but ongoing, you're going to have to spend money on electricity, because unless you have some type of solar home or something where you're not really paying much, if anything, for electricity, the cost of, you got to figure that in to your costs. So just getting the fastest or most powerful card is not actually the best mining solution, because if it's using a lot more electricity than the number of hashes that it can process, you're not doing well. So our graphics editor, Jared Walton, went through and tested about 24 graphics cards to see which gives you the best mining performance for the money. And he looked at how much power they're using, how much money you make per day at the current value of Ethereum. And this is, of course, and he looked at the price going by the current eBay price. So granted that the prices are out of control, this is what the current out of control prices are. So this is an accurate picture, at least as of the other day, as of a day or two ago. So you might be surprised to hear that the most efficient mining card is the best for your, in other words, the least amount of days to break even your investment on it is the old, this is what, 3-4 year old GTX 1060. The NVIDIA GTX 1060 right now goes for about $271. Now, if you already own one, then it goes for, and it's sitting around doing nothing, then it goes for $0, and you will be using, we figure that the daily profit on that would be about $2.82. So it would take you 96 days to earn that $271. Followed by the Radeon RX 590, which generates about $3.16 a day and will take you 106 days to break even. Again, this is because not only are we talking about cost, but we're talking about wattage. As far as giving all money aside, cards that use really low wattage for relative to what you're going to generate, the RTX 3060 Ti is fantastic in that regard. It uses only 116 watts, and it generates $7.08 a day of profit. The most profitable card per day, but keep in mind that it's using 279 watts, is the RTX 3090 at $12.26 a day. And this is assuming, of course, that it is going all day long. So 24 hours a day, which does not even keep into account that, hey, maybe your card won't last forever, right? If you're running it 24/7, the fans will wear out. Will the heat eventually kill it? Who knows how many years you'll be able to continue using that hardware. But so you can see that at $7 a day from one card, from one PC, this is not exactly a great get rich quick scheme. You would need a farm of these, tons and tons and tons of them, and you would need to be paying the electricity for them, and that's not just the card. You would need, obviously, the rest of the computer around it. So there's a lot of reasons that this isn't a great way to make money. But if you already have the cards and you want to give it a try, you can check out our article on which ones work best. We're also going to have some information about how one could get started. Although this is not necessary. If you haven't already gotten started, you may not wanna, because it is, you're probably not going to come out massively ahead. And let's keep in mind, these things go up and down. So this is based on what Ethereum is worth today. What's Ethereum going to be worth in the future? I mean, no one can say, but these things have gone down massively before, so I wouldn't count on this being a great long-term strategy. But like anything else, there are people who have invested a lot of money in it, and these are people who have giant farms of servers, giant farms of laptops, giant farms of computers, and some of them are willing to pay, $2,000 for an $800 graphics card because they have such a huge farm of these, and they're totally committed. And I guess that they'll earn back in 6 months or something like that. But I personally, I'm not going to spend my time on this, but I know that it's an area of great interest for a lot of people. And if you're interested, to check out our article on the best mining GPUs. We've also done a story about mining efficiency, and we've done a story about mining laptops. So check it out at Tom's Hardware.
Now, obviously, you were talking a lot about Ethereum there. There are others that are seeing some pretty big spikes right now.
Dogecoin.
Well, there's that one. Monero is the one that I've been following lately because you may remember that I did a test a while back after we talked about a particular product that ran in the background in JavaScript on websites. And kind of by accident, during that test, we mined a number of coins, and at the time they were worth about $1.25, and right now they are worth $213. So it's a pretty nice accidental windfall.
No, that's not bad. And look, I mean, if you have hardware lying around and electricity is either extremely cheap or free to you, this might be an interesting thing to try. I just wouldn't recommend people to buy a lot of expensive hardware to get into crypto mining.
Yeah, for sure.
But if you've got stuff laying around, maybe you can give it a shot. I mean, it could be interesting. It could be an interesting thing to learn from. And it's gotten a lot easier to do the mining. There's a service called NiceHash that makes it really easy. So it's definitely it's not hard to get started.
There's also MinerGate, which was pretty easy. Click, 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 and you're off and running. So there's like you said, there's ways to do it. I remember when things were really crazy the first time around, people were looking for every opportunity to find every penny they could in mining, and there were people who discovered that based on the cost of their electricity, they were paying more than like $25 a day for their rigs. They discovered that if they rented a hotel room in Vegas, they could run them in a hotel room for $25 a day, and it was less than the electricity they were paying.
Did the hotel room eventually catch on to this? Because I could imagine you get away with it for a little while.
I would imagine that some policies went into place after it, but yeah, it was definitely a fascinating time. For people who have been around the show for a long time, you probably remember that my brother was heavily into it. He had an investor, and they built a whole business around it, and so fascinating. I mean,
space. It's also just a colossal waste of maybe you want to talk about a waste, but it's a colossal use of electricity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I read some stat on the cost of mining per day, and it was a ridiculous amount of money. It was more than like the GDP of France or something like that. It was absolutely ridiculous, but whatever. It's not my space to get into. It's a thing that I'm interested in because of the other side of it, which is the blockchain side. But yeah, cryptocurrency has never been my place. But like you said, a lot of people are interested in it, and I appreciate you bringing us the details.
Yes, we also have an article on how to mine with your Raspberry Pi, which you can do. It may take you several years or something to mine a coin, but you can do it. You can attempt it.
That's pretty funny. Well, to each their own, right?
Yeah.
Well, Avram, thank you, and I look forward to what we talk about next time. This week's Extra Life on F5 Live is proudly powered by Razer. Get all the accessories you need to up your game on PC, console, or mobile from Razer. Whether you're looking for a new gaming mouse and keyboard like we use here in the studio, a webcam and light for your Twitch stream, or an entire gaming setup like the Razer Blade 15, you can find it all at Razer by going to f5live.tv/Razer. So we know that CD Projekt Red has had a difficult 12 months for a number of reasons, not the least of which has been some of the response to performance on Cyberpunk 2077, which we actually talked about how to get the most out of your performance on the Piltch point right after it came out. But this week, their fate, well, I guess it was last week, their fate changed a little bit, and it was revealed that one way or another, there are some potential conflicts on this, but one way or another, they were hacked and hit with ransomware, and they were being demanded a large sum of money or the source code that they had stolen, including for Cyberpunk 2077 and The Witcher 3, which had in the code that was taken, apparently a full unreleased, fully playable demo beta. So a lot of code out in the wild. The threat was that would all be released. This week, an auction went up. On the dark web, obviously, and using Bitcoin, you could buy into the auction. It cost at the time of the buy-in right around $5,000. I think it was 4730 or something like that worth of Bitcoin. About $5,000 just to be able to bid. The opening was 500K. And as of the closing, it was 1 million. But the auction was closed with a note that said that they had received an acceptable offer from outside of the auction and that they had closed it themselves.
That's not fair to all the people who want to buy this stolen property.
That's okay, because the general consensus within the security realm is that is not what happened. Instead, what happened was nobody cared. The one and only bid that was there was likely from them, and they closed it to save face. Why? Because ransomware only works if the threat is followed through on. And in this case, apparently, the group who's believed to be behind this has failed before. And so, in an attempt to save face, the current belief is that they closed the auction claiming to have received money from outside, when in reality they had not even received a bid. So that's fascinating for a couple of reasons. One of them being the idea that that even on the dark web, people didn't want Cyberpunk 2077, which is pretty funny after all the trouble they went through. But in reality, what are the chances you're actually going to get it, right?
But what do you? Let me take a step back here. Why do you want it? Like, what would you do with the source code of a game that's already out?
Yes.
What good would it do you? Why is that worth anything to anyone?
I don't know.
Like a competitor? I mean, the game's out there. People can play the game, right? They can see what's going on in the game. I'm not up on what game engine CD Projekt Red used for this, but the concept of a first-person shooter with game engine is not complicated. It's not like there's some massively wonderful technology in there that needs to be exploited. It's a game with a story and graphics and characters and whatever, and the game is out there. People have been playing it for a couple months. What good is the source code going to do anybody? Like,
I agree.
Do they think they're going to compile the source code on their own and then sell bootleg copies of Cyberpunk? I mean, I'm sure there are better ways to pirate than that. And, what's the pirate market for this really going to be anyway? I mean,
right.
I don't see how the source code of these already released games, even if games had no issues and were super popular, we're going to, are going to do anything for anyone.
It's definitely, yes, there are so many questions about about what happened here, what they had hoped to get out of it, why they thought that there'd be value in this. Obviously, CD Projekt Red went through and they saw that no customer data was involved. They said that out. They said that publicly. And then they essentially called the bluff and said, all right, do it. And the end result seems to be that nobody cared.
It's just embarrassing for them. That's all.
Yeah.
It's just embarrassing for them because it's yet another, another injury. But it's not, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
There's no value to that. Like, if someone had gotten it like 6 months ago, then that might have been worth something. But now that the game has been out, yeah, someone should buy it and use it to fix the bugs. I mean, what's the point?
Yeah, wouldn't that be extra embarrassing?
Yes.
If not, the developer was able to fix the bugs faster than the developer themselves.
Yeah. I mean, while we're talking Cyberpunk, I have to say I played it a little bit.
I'm gonna let you talk for just a second because I have to go look at something on another computer that's doing something.
Great. So let's talk about Cyberpunk 2077. It plays really well on GeForce Now, including GeForce Now in the browser. However, I tested it recently because I was dying to know, could you play it on a Raspberry Pi using the web-based version of GeForce Now? So there's good news and bad news. The good news is the Chromium browser that comes with Raspberry Pi OS can run GeForce Now. It does not try to stop you, does not give you any errors or warnings. It just works.
Mm-hmm.
The bad news is the amount of lag is so great, and I don't think this is particular to Cyberpunk. I think it would be any game that it is completely unplayable. Like, it's even unmenuable. Like, you hit the button to like move down one in the menu, and it might take like 15 seconds or so to like move the highlight down. And when you have that type of lag, sometimes you're wondering like, oh, did it get my keystroke or not? So then you hit it again. But then it happens twice. So, I got to playing it and it was just like completely unusable. And I even tried turning down the amount of bandwidth. I don't have easy access to Ethernet here in my office, but I asked one of my coworkers who does, and Ethernet didn't help. So I'm not sure why the latency is so bad. But if you're on a PC, I used it on my PC using Chrome, it played fantastically. So if you're having performance issues with Cyberpunk, you can play it on GeForce Now through using either GeForce Now software or just a web browser, and it works at least on a computer. It works really, really well.
And that it's a great option, especially now that we know that Chrome, Safari, it's available in basically all the browsers. And I did test, by the way, yes, if you change the user agent string on Edge to Chrome, it works fine. So it's a great way to play the game if you're in that situation, because we've all been in that situation if you've tried to play games, either really new games on slightly older hardware or really old games on new hardware where your inputs don't necessarily match the behavior on the screen, and so you double hit and that just makes everything go away. So yeah, Cyberpunk 2077 on GeForce Now works real well. So anyway, it's weird. The whole thing, the whole hack is weird. You're absolutely right. It's just another level of embarrassment for them in a 12-month period that has not been kind to them anyway. This week's news from the tubes and F5 Live is proudly powered by RiffTrax. Make fun of movies, let these guys do it for you. Mike Nelson, Bill Corbett, and Kevin Murphy, the former stars of Mystery Science Theater 3000, are back and doing what they do best, creating commentaries for Hollywood blockbusters and B-movie oddities. It's like watching a movie with your funniest friends, and to find out about all of the full-length features, the short films, the TV episodes, and the live events that are coming up, you can go to f5live.tv/rifftrax with an X. Now, I know this isn't what we're talking about, but I gotta say, they've got a new, and I know we talk about it too much, another subscription service, but there's a lot of content. Anyway, I just saw something about it this week. Anyway, so we said that we've got some trailblazing laws and bills out there. This is another topic on that. When the internet first came about, there were kind of no taxes. It was a bit of a wild west. States came around and started to implement taxes, and just like we talked about earlier with Apple and North Dakota, states that had implemented online sales taxes. Amazon wouldn't put distribution centers, warehouses, offices to avoid paying those taxes. But a couple of states got the ball rolling, and today it's pretty ubiquitous. The next place that it seems that states are going to try is on online advertising revenue. As it turns out, for whatever reason, online ad revenue has mostly been untaxed in states where the revenue is generated, only in the state where it's received. So for Facebook and Google, probably both, that would be under California law. But Maryland has decided... I apologize, something just talked and I don't know what. Because I don't have any devices in here that should have just done that, which is a little terrifying. Anyway, somebody's listening. Uh, so Maryland has decided that they are going to tax the revenue that is generated in their states, and here's how they're going to do it. Let's say, we'll use Google as an example because they're obviously number one in advertising. Let's say all 330 million, we'll use some easy numbers, residents of the U.S. see the exact same ad once, and Google charges a penny, which is way high. But let's say they charge a penny for each one of those views. The revenue on that would be 3.3 million. There are 330 million U.S. residents. There are 6 million in Maryland, which comes out to 1.8% of the population, which means it would be 1.8% of the views, which would mean it would be 1.8% of the 3.3 million in revenue off of those ads, which comes out to $60,000 worth of taxable revenue on that ad in the state of Maryland. I know, lots of math. Here's the thing. This is only the first. This semi predates, but really kind of ramped up at the very beginning of our show 14 years ago, when states were really starting to look into taxing online sales. And I remember in the early days us talking about Amazon taking a stand and not putting business, not putting offices.
Yeah. I mean, there was a thing, right? There was a thing where if you ordered, I think it was a thing going on for a while with Newegg, where Newegg had a warehouse in New Jersey, but they didn't have one in New York. So if I ordered something here in New York, I wouldn't get taxed, but someone in New Jersey would. Mm-hmm. It was kind of unfair, and to be fair to the governments, it was unfair to brick and mortar stores too, because you could avoid sales tax by going online.
Right.
And as more people were going online, sales tax became a more meaningless form of tax.
Right.
It becomes a more meaningless form of tax because if you can avoid it by going online, that's what people are going to do, and more people are. And even if they're not doing it to avoid the tax, I mean, you're just buying more and more stuff online. Right. What I don't understand though is, and I say this as someone who works for a website that gets paid on ad revenue, but I don't go and buy ads. Do you not pay sales tax when you buy ads?
Nope.
Like if
I've never paid sales tax on an
ad. Is that not where? So now,
at least not that I'm aware of. To be fair, at least not that I'm aware of. Just like in the state of Florida, there's no income tax, but there is because your employer pays it before they pay you. So you don't see it, you don't interact with it. It may be the same thing. This may be the European model where you're told you're paying $5, and little do you know, 7% of that is in a sales tax. You just don't. I don't know, but I've never seen sales tax. I've never seen a tax line. If I pay $5 in ads, I pay $5, not $5.35.
Now, on the other hand, Maryland probably wouldn't get much money if it was on the incoming, because how many businesses in Maryland are buying online ads compared to how many people in Maryland are seeing online ads from businesses that are outside of Maryland.
Right.
But it seems odd to me that you're you're taxing people for who's seeing their ad rather than taxing on because usually we see taxes coming on sort of the exchange of money, right? Like you
transactional
earn money,
taxes.
or you spend money or you earn money and you get taxed. Mm-hmm. Unless, of course, it's a property tax, which is, for me as a homeowner, it's the most frustrating tax because no matter how much I earn, my property tax is the same. So if my income were to go down, I still would have to pay the same property tax, which, I would become less affordable to me. But anyway, that's taxes in general. So I guess they're looking for a way to, to monetize this. What I don't get is you're saying that they're doing it based on what percentage of the U.S. population Maryland is, but shouldn't they get more specific data about who in Maryland saw it?
Yes. So that was for simple illustration purposes. That was assuming everybody in the country saw one ad one time at the same rate. That's unrealistic. Right. So perhaps there's a company who very specific, a big company, let's say Verizon, very specifically wants to target Maryland, and 40% of all the eyeballs on a particular ad are in Maryland. It's 40% of the revenue is what is the taxes levied against.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be hard. I mean, I think that's going to be hard to enforce.
It's going to be hard to report,
but I guess,
sure.
Yeah, hard to. I mean, the reporting on that seems like kind of a nightmare. On the other hand, ads are very I mean, also I believe that they're really narrowly targeting this towards large companies. So because it says you have to have at least $100 million in ad revenue. So if I'm setting up a blog or something and I'm selling some ads on it, I'm not affected by this tax. You have to be. It's pretty much a handful of companies.
Yeah, you and I aren't gonna have to deal with it. Well, maybe someday it would be nice, but based on our ad reads in the show, we're not gonna have to pay a tax on the sales there or on anything that we do for like CES and things like that. I would be nice to have that kind of revenue, but no, it's not going to affect us.
I mean, at least they're not creating a burden on small businesses. Right. They're creating a burden on large businesses that can
Facebook and Google
that can handle it. Because I guarantee you, Facebook and Google. But I mean, to be fair to Maryland, Facebook and Google probably know how many people from a particular state saw the ad. Yeah. They ought to know, right? I mean,
I can get reports on ads I run on Facebook right down to sometimes down to the county.
Right. So they know. Now, granted, there's going to be things that go around that because there will be people who use VPN and things like that I assume will cut into that. But yeah, I mean, there's some money for Maryland to be made here. I mean, I do understand that this is definitely going to be passed along to the ad buyer, which is I think Google's point, right? That they're not just going to eat that 1.8%.
Right.
They're just going to raise their rates accordingly.
Up to 10%, depending on certain conditions.
Yeah. So
up to a 10% ad rate, tax rate on that in my example on that $60,000, up to 10% of that could be taxable, depending on a whole matrix of crazy. Yeah, you know how taxes work. There's a matrix of crazy rules and whatever, but the top bracket is 10%. And you can guarantee Google's going to fall into that 10%.
You know what though? This might actually create a little bit more. I mean, one could certainly argue this is unfair to Google, but unfair to Google and Facebook, but causing them to raise their rates 10% might actually make it a little bit easier for smaller companies that are selling ads, because they have the amount of volume that they can charge a lot less because they have so much. They get a lot of that. I mean, in our next segment, I think we're going to talk about how Google and Facebook get money from, use things from publishers to generate their own ad revenue without having to pay for the content.
Right. So,
those, like, let's say here's an example. Let's say I run a newspaper in Maryland and I'm selling ads on my newspaper's website, right? I almost guarantee you that that even the biggest newspaper in Maryland probably doesn't earn anywhere close to $100 million a year in online ad sales. Right. So, so they don't have as much inventory. They're hyper local. They probably are trying to charge a higher CPM than Google does, but Google, being Google, has their market position. They can afford to sell it for less, all this stuff. Right. So this actually levels the playing field a little bit for smaller publishers. I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. I think, obviously we're always skeptical about more regulations coming online, more taxes, things that could, slow down business. But this seems like, you could argue it's unfair to these large companies, but it's sort of hyper targeted at a couple of really large players who already have kind of an outsized advantage in the online ad space.
And this could be the thing that starts to bring back the old, smaller ad networks. The old ad rings were successful, they were helpful, and then today Google owns most of the companies that used to be the old small ad rings.
Right, exactly. There's like, it's in a way it's a whole other thing that obviously there are a lot of people who want to investigate or talk about antitrust things in relation to big tech. Well, one of the things that's going on, of course, is that Google and Facebook control so much of the advertising market that it's really difficult for other services to sell ads. And a lot of the ads that people see on the internet, even if you're not on Google or Facebook, are sold by Google. Right? Like Google AdSense is everywhere. And as a publisher, you don't make nearly as much money from Google AdSense as you do if you could sell your own ads.
Right. Yeah. And that's partially because they're offering lower prices than you would be able to, which creates it's the Walmart business model, right? You keep your prices low until there's no competition, and then you reevaluate. So, and the state senator, office reference for you guys, the state senator that proposed this said, right now they don't contribute. These platforms that have grown fast and so enormously should also have to contribute to the civic infrastructure that helped them become so successful. So it's an interesting and a strong statement, Maryland. So the two chambers of the House, they call it the General Assembly in Maryland, passed this actually last year. So why are we talking about it now? Because the governor vetoed it, and they just overrode the veto this past week. So this will be going into effect and could start a trend. And that's why it's important, because these trends move a lot faster today than they did in the days of sales tax online. So if this catches on, it will catch on fast. This week's DRM Not Included on F5 Live is proudly powered by Amazon Prime. You get free shipping, but you get a whole lot of other stuff with your subscription, including Amazon Prime Music, which gives you free music. You've got Amazon Prime Video, which has TV, movies, and documentaries for free. You've got Amazon Prime Gaming, which gives you one free subscription on Twitch, so you can financially support the content creator of your choice, and you get free games every month that are yours to keep. And there's a whole lot more. We've got quick links to these features and more, a 30-day free trial if you're not an existing subscriber, and even a way to give it as a gift, all by going to f5live.tv/prime. So Avram alluded to this just a minute ago. We're going to keep talking about Google and Facebook, this time on the kind of the other side of it, one of the ways that Google and Facebook have made their name is by sharing other people's content. Facebook in a large part, but Google has gotten into it and gotten into trouble a number of times, sometimes for scraping entire databases, Yelp, and presenting the data as their own. So in a number of countries, we've seen some battles, particularly over news. Now, we've talked a lot in past shows. You can go back and hear our commentary on it. There is a weird fine line, particularly with Google, but also with Facebook, on an online publisher's reliance on and hatred of Google and Facebook. Because sometimes they steal your content wholesale and don't drive people to your site, which is where the advertising is, oftentimes sold by Google, which is how you pay your bills. I know, this show's come in weird circles tonight. We talked a couple of weeks ago about a law being proposed in Australia that even Bernard Lee, who created the World Wide Web, has said is a fundamental misunderstanding of the technology. But it's gotten interesting because Australia has some new support. Obviously, Google and Facebook are not happy about this idea that would require them to pay publishers every time they share a link. So if you go onto Facebook and share the Australian Today show's link to some article on Facebook, Facebook has to pay the Australian Today show for that link. It's super complicated, but just know it's a very strange precedent. Like I said, kind of everybody has been in support of Google and Facebook on this until Microsoft got involved, and they took a stance that's a little surprising because they are in support of what Australia is up to, and I have my theories on why. Google has said that they would be willing to pull out of the country if this law is passed, and Microsoft has said, no worries, Bing can fill the gap.
It sounds like an act of desperation on Microsoft's part.
Yeah.
That they just look, there's a market, it's a whole continent. We can dominate this market. So yeah, I mean, look, it's good that we have more. It's good that we actually have another player in search. I mean, I'm surprised Microsoft hasn't given up on Bing, considering how poorly, Bing does in the marketplace.
I think the sentence you're looking for is how quickly Microsoft gives up on products these days.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft and Google have given up on a lot of products more quickly than this. I mean, they gave up on Cortana, pretty much, right? Yeah. So why?
Thanks for reminding me, because all of my devices recently reminded me that Cortana is going away, including my Invoke speaker.
Right. So I continue to be surprised that, I mean, it's good. I mean, there ought to be alternatives, right? And there, besides Bing, the only other alternative I can think of is DuckDuckGo, which I'm not even sure if that is a business or not.
I have no idea. I have not figured...
DuckDuckGo is the default search engine on Raspberry Pi OS.
It's also the default search engine on Tor. Because it's privacy centric.
It's popular with open source, which I'm not sure if it's actually actually makes money or not. This is obviously it's bad news, but here's my question. If you're a publisher, could you opt out of getting paid by Google?
It's fascinating. I don't know.
Because the logistics of this is really difficult too.
Right.
Google links to everything on the web. Google doesn't have the contact information and payment information of everything on the web. Granted, Google News does have a more limited. Google News doesn't take everything on the internet. I think you have to set up.
But while Spain and France were all about Google News, this is not. This is not limited to Google News. This is everything.
Also, what's a publisher?
Uh-huh.
Have they defined what a publisher is?
No.
Because your first thought probably is, oh yeah, they're talking about like they're talking about professional publishers, they're talking about media sites, but everybody's a publisher online.
Yep.
So, if I have a restaurant and you read the menu, are you going to have to pay? Is Google have to pay me for listing that? I mean, I want to be listed. My guess is if you asked most companies, they would say, don't pay me, just keep me in Google because I need to be in Google.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
Granted,
because you have the choice now. The choice is there now. You could be Google is more than happy to delist anybody who wants to be delisted.
Yep.
So if you would like your site not to appear in Google, you can. It's very easy to make your site not appear in Google.
Yes.
That is the exact opposite of pretty much what everybody on the internet wants, which is to be high on Google.
Right.
Right. Be the highly ranked on Google. But if you don't want to be ranked in Google, you're welcome. You're welcome to be excluded from Google.
Yeah, you can tell them to bugger off. There's a bunch of ways to do it.
Yeah. Now, the other side of this, though, is what Australia maybe is trying to get at but doesn't seem to understand well enough, which is that there is somewhat of that the relationship between Google and publishers is very one-sided.
Mm-hmm.
Google is making a ton of money on listing things, and it's not just the listings that they're using. Like, if they were more targeted in what they were going after, like, hey, Google, you're not just listing stuff, you also have your Google answer box, for example, which takes content wholesale off of websites and puts it in the search result, effectively often making it not necessary for someone to actually click through to that website. Maybe there's an argument that Google should be paying publishers when they do that. Yet if you ask publishers, they would tell you the same thing about Google Answer Box that they would tell you about Google regular results, which is, well, better to be there and not get paid than not to be there at all.
Right.
People want that box because it's the top box, and hopefully people click. There is a link in it, and hopefully people click it. However, a lot of the times the information you're providing when it gets sucked into that top box is good enough, that is sufficient enough that people may not need to click to you. So, or images, right? Google takes images for Google search from people's sites. Some of those images, I'm surprised that like Reuters and Associated Press haven't gotten after Google about this. Mm-hmm. Have they? I mean, I've not heard of it. Where there are images from news that are sometimes from people pay good money for that Google is showing.
Yeah. So there was a whole thing about that. Official Getty sources have been removed wholesale. There's a lot of things that have been removed. There is a process for marking images as not searchable. Now, there didn't used to be. It used to be everything was there. If it saw an image, it indexed it. And then you could start searching by color and all kinds of crazy stuff. And then
I think if you go to Google News and you see not for new image search, but specifically like the image that they show you with the article, I think that comes from whoever published the article.
Yes.
Google is showing it.
Yes.
I don't think Google, I know anytime any of my articles are shown up there, they're not, they're not paying me for to show the image, which,
right.
Once again, if people are clicking, I'm happy. But if I was Getty or, Reuters or one of these companies that they don't care about traffic. They just want to get paid. They just want their money.
Right.
For licensing the image. So I don't know. I mean, so I think everybody who's in publishing can kind of see where Australia is coming from.
Yes.
The problem that they're trying to address.
Yeah.
But the way in which they're trying to address it seems like they've not used the internet, and is just like, I think for me, the right way to think of anything, how to regulate anything online, is how would you do it offline, and then try to extend it to the online world. It's not that complicated.
Yeah.
So
sometimes
in the offline world,
sometimes, because that's, I use this example all the time because it's the funniest thing that's possibly happened. That Netflix wasn't allowed to allow you to share what movie you had just watched because some federal judge had a movie rental place tell the news that he had rented an adult VHS sometime in the 80s. So sometimes basing it on the physical world ends up backfiring a little bit, but it is a good exercise for sure.
Well, I mean, I can't speak to that case per se, but like in the real world, right? If you were to tell somebody, hey, go read this article that I saw, and nobody would say, oh, pay up. If I tell you, hey, I saw this great article in the New York Times today, you should read it. No one would expect me to pay the New York Times for it recommending you to go there.
Right.
If you ask me what's a good place to go get hot dogs, and I tell you go to that hot dog stand, the hot dog stand should pay me, if anything, right? I mean, I'm sending you their way.
Affiliate program.
So, right. So it doesn't, in real life, you would, for telling somebody to do something, to go this is where to go to get information. I mean, are you going to start charging librarians for telling people which stack to get the book from? Like, that's the equivalent of what Google does when it's linking.
Right. Absolutely. And yes. Okay. So to use the newspaper article example, you say, hey, I saw this article about so-and-so, whatever, about the topic. You use a sentence or two to describe it, and then say, go read it. That's what Google does, right? Google says, here's a sentence or so about it. You should go read it. Now, not always. Like you said, there's the answer box and things like that screw that up a little bit. But in general, they say, here's a little bit of information about a thing. You should go read it.
Yep. Yeah, and in that respect, they are providing extremely valuable public service.
Yes, absolutely. For sure. So it's definitely, like you said, I can see where they're coming from, but I don't think this is the way to get there. It seems like Berners-Lee said, fundamental misunderstanding of how the web works. So, we don't know if it's going to go forward. It is a proposition at this point. It is not a bill that has been actually even put into up for a vote or anything. It is a proposition. They're looking for input. And other than Microsoft, so far the input has not been positive. And my suspicion is it will stay that way. Well, that is our show. Thank you to those of you who joined us live, including the person who just asked a question, which I will address in just a second. We always appreciate our live viewers, and we always love to get questions, such as, what LED strips do you have behind you? Good question. These are the Monster Smart Illuminescence LED strips. If you're in the US, you can get them at Walmart. You can get them at monsterilluminescence.com, but Walmart's less expensive than buying them direct. So definitely buy them at Walmart if you're in the US. If you're not, you're gonna have to get them on the website. They're super cool. All kinds of capabilities that we have. If you watched our CES coverage, they were all CES colors. It was really fun. Anyway, that's the answer to your question. So thank you for your question. Like we started the show with a bunch of questions from a couple of weeks ago. We will continue to do that. If we continue to get questions on the Piltch point or other stuff like that, we will address them at the top of the show. And yeah, so I guess with that, on behalf of the staff that's not here, I'm Scott.
I'm Avram.
And we will see you back next time. Ciao. Hello, YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of F5 Live Refreshing Technology. If you did, please subscribe to the channel down below, and of course hit the notification bell because we know that subscriptions don't mean much on YouTube anymore. If you've got topics that you'd like us to talk about in the future, please comment them down below. And if you'd like to not follow us on YouTube, there's lots of ways that you can follow along with our content by going to PLUGHITZlive.com/subscribe. There you'll see all of our shows and all of the ways that you can watch, listen, and follow along.